Rain fell hard over Daysol that night. Cold, sharp rain that bounced off glass towers and turned the streets into black mirrors. Streetlights blurred into streaks of gold. Sirens flashed red and blue against wet pavement. Sujin Park never saw the shot coming. One second she was walking home after a long shift at Myri Medical Center. The next, a burning force tore through her shoulder and spun her sideways. She hit the ground hard. Her white scrubs, always white, always clean, began turning crimson. Too fast. Too much. The rain soaked into the fabric, but it could not hide the blood. It spread across her shoulder like spilled wine on linen. Warm at first, then cold. She pressed her palm against the wound. Her fingers slipped. The rain washed the blood between them, sending thin red streams down into the cracks of the pavement. The smell of iron mixed with wet concrete. Her ID badge lay against her chest, catching the flashing emergency lights from a patrol car. The words were clear even through the rain. Bakemail Amber Trauma Unit. 3 shadows stood over her. Dark uniforms. Heavy boots. Hard faces. Police officers. One of them stepped closer, rain dripping from the brim of his cap. His voice was flat and full of contempt. Should have stayed in your own country, nurse. The words hit almost as hard as the bullet. Sujin tried to lift her head. Tried to speak. She wanted to tell them they were mistaken. She wanted to say she saved lives. That she was not their enemy. That she had done nothing wrong. But her breath came in shallow gasps. Every inhale burned. Her chest felt tight like someone was sitting on it. The officer raised his gun slightly, not pointing now, just holding it like a reminder. Later, his name would be known as Detective Nolan Mercer. But in that moment he was just a shape above her. Rain ran down his face, washing nothing away. Sujin's vision blurred. The streetlights doubled. The sirens echoed strangely in her ears. The stethoscope still hung around her neck, heavy and useless. Her phone buzzed inside her pocket. The vibration felt distant, almost unreal. She tried to move her hand toward it. Her fingers trembled. The phone slipped from her pocket and hit the wet ground beside her. The screen cracked on impact, but it lit up. Through spiderweb glass she could see the name. Ethan Black. She could not answer. A sound escaped her lips, but it was not a word. Just air. Just pain. Then, through the open line the gunshot echoed. High above the city, inside a penthouse of glass and steel, Ethan Black stood by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Daysol skyline. Rain streaked down the glass in long silver lines. The city hummed beneath him. His phone was pressed to his ear. He heard breathing. What? Uneven. Struggling. Sujin, he said. Then the gunshot cracked through the line. Everything stopped. He did not drop the phone. He crushed it. The device shattered in his grip, plastic and glass breaking against his palm. The whiskey glass in his other hand exploded against the window. Amber liquid ran down the glass like tears the city would never see him shed. Behind him, the penthouse doors opened quietly. Sir, a voice began. Lieutenant Jasunim stood at the entrance, calm but alert. Ethan did not turn immediately. He stared at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Immaculate hair. A man who controlled shipping routes, supply chains, and the invisible veins of the city with a single phone call. But he could not control this. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold enough to freeze steel. Find them. Jasunim straightened. Sir, we don't know who. I don't care, Ethan cut in. He turned then and his eyes were empty of anything soft. I don't care if they wear badges or crowns. I don't care if they're ghosts or gods. He stepped forward, adjusting his tie with steady hands. His voice sharpened like a blade. My wife was shot 31 seconds ago in my city. On my streets. Silence filled the room. Jasunim bowed his head slightly. Yes, sir. Bring me everyone who was within a mile of that corner, Ethan continued. Every officer. Every witness. Every camera feed. He paused only once. And informed the trauma unit at Myri Medical Center that if my wife does not survive the next hour. His jaw tightened. Neither do they. Jasunim did not question the threat. He turned and disappeared, already making calls. Ethan was left alone. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rolled in the distance. Below him, Daysol carried on. Cars moved. Restaurants stayed open. People laughed under umbrellas. No one knew that something had shifted. No one knew that a line had been crossed. Ethan stood in his tower, hands resting lightly against the cool glass. The city lights reflected in his eyes. Somewhere below, surgeons would soon be fighting to keep Sujin alive. Somewhere below, 3 officers still stood in the rain. And above them all, a man who rarely lost anything had just lost control. The rain kept falling. The city had no idea it was about to burn. 7 months earlier, Sujin Park did not come to Day Sol for love. She came for silence. Baltimore had taken everything from her. It had taken her sleep. It had taken her peace. Slowly, it had taken the part of her that believed hard work was always enough. For 7 years, she worked at Harbor Line Metro General. The emergency department never rested. Sirens screamed day and night. Ambulance doors slammed open. Stretchers rolled and covered with blood, dirt, and fear. Her shifts lasted 13 hours, sometimes longer. She stopped checking the clock after her 3rd year. Time did not matter in a trauma bay. Only vitals mattered. Only breathing mattered. Only stopping the bleeding mattered. The air inside the ER always smelled the same, sharp, metallic, heavy. The smell of copper from fresh blood mixed with disinfectant that could not hide it. Desperation hung in the room like smoke. Gunshot wounds were common. Too common. Sujin had learned to recognize them the way other people recognized faces. A small, clean entry wound from close range. A messy exit wound from the back. Burns around the skin from powder. She knew the difference between an accident and something deliberate. Too many of the young men who rolled in on stretchers reminded her of her little brother. Same age. Same build. Same fear in their eyes when they realized they might not survive the night. Sometimes they lived. Sometimes they didn't. Sujin learned to keep her face calm no matter what happened. Families needed steady voices. Doctors needed quick hands. She gave both. She became known as one of the best trauma nurses in the hospital. But being the best did not stop the losses. The night that broke her came on a cold Thursday in early spring. A 6-year-old boy was brought in by ambulance. His name was Caleb Morrison. Wrong place. Wrong time. He had been standing outside a corner store when 2 groups started shooting at each other across the street. A stray bullet found him. When they wheeled him into the trauma bay, his small body looked even smaller on the large hospital bed. His shirt was soaked red. His mother followed behind, screaming his name over and over. Sujin took her position without hesitation. Starting compressions, she said, her voice steady. The room moved fast. Doctors called out instructions. 4 lines were placed. Blood transfusion started. Monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. Sujin pressed down on his chest again and again. Her shoulders burned. Her gloves became slick with blood. She wiped her hands quickly and continued. 44 minutes. She worked on him for 44 minutes. She refused to stop. She refused to believe it was over. She counted compressions. She watched the monitor. She prayed silently, though she had stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. But sometimes everything is not enough. The flat line came quietly. A single long tone that cut through the chaos. The doctor called the time of death. The room fell silent except for Caleb's mother. Her scream filled the hallway. It was not loud at first. It was broken. Like something inside her had shattered beyond repair. Sujin stepped back from the bed. Her gloves were heavy with blood. For a moment she could not feel her hands. Later that night, after the body was taken away and the floor was cleaned, she went into the staff bathroom and locked the door. She did not cry loudly. She did not collapse. She just stood there, staring at her reflection in the mirror, and felt something inside her go empty. 2 weeks later, she submitted her resignation. Her supervisor looked at the paper for a long time before speaking. "You're the best trauma nurse we have," he said. "Take a leave of absence. Don't quit." Sujin shook her head. "I'm done watching children die in a war zone," she replied quietly. "I'm done." He tried again. Offered counseling. Offered fewer shifts. Offered time off. But she had already made her decision. She did not tell anyone that she had been searching for jobs overseas late at night. She did not explain why she chose a city she had never visited in a country where she barely spoke the language. She just knew she needed distance. An email from Myri Medical Center had appeared in her inbox. Experienced trauma nurses needed. Competitive salary. Housing stipend. Visa sponsorship available. The message was simple. Direct. Sujin replied within the hour. 3 weeks later, she stood at the airport with 2 suitcases and a heart that felt hollow. Baltimore's skyline faded behind airplane glass. She did not look back. When she arrived at Hanoi International Airport, Day Sol spread before her in silver and neon. Steel towers reached toward the sky. Digital billboards glowed in bright colors. The streets looked clean, ordered, almost calm. It did not sound like gunfire. It sounded like life. For the first time in months she felt something close to relief. She believed she had found peace. She believed she had left the chaos behind. She had no idea that this city held a different kind of storm. She had no idea that in trying to run from violence she had walked straight into the center of power. She thought she came for silence. She had no idea she had found him. The trauma bay at Myri Medical Center looked different from the one Sujin had worked in back in America. The equipment was newer. The machines were quieter. The lights were brighter. The floors shone. Digital monitors lined the walls. Everything felt clean and precise. But blood was the same in every language. It smelled the same. It moved the same. And it demanded the same urgency. Sujin had been in Day Seoul for 5 months when the call came through the overhead speaker. Gunshot wound incoming. Her body reacted before her mind did. She snapped on gloves. Pulled her mask into place. Checked the crash cart without looking down. The vocabulary that mattered had already become natural to her. Hemorrhage. Intubate. Oxygen. Pressure. Code blue. The automatic doors at the end of the hall burst open. A gurney rushed in fast. And it was not alone. 6 men in black suits surrounded it like a moving wall. They were not paramedics. They were not hospital staff. They moved with purpose and tension, eyes scanning the room. On the gurney lay a tall man in a white dress shirt soaked deep red at the abdomen. His face was pale, but his eyes were open. Sharp. Calculating. Alert. Even in pain he looked in control. Gunshot to the abdomen, the lead resident reported quickly while cutting open the shirt. Entry wound, lower left quadrant. No visible exit. Sujin moved into position at the head of the bed. Vitals? Dropping. She leaned forward, focusing only on the wound. The blood was heavy and dark. Internal bleeding was likely. Time mattered. Behind her, boots scraped across the floor. One of the suited men stepped forward, crossing into the trauma area. His hand hovered near his jacket, where the shape of a weapon was clear. The air changed instantly. Tension spread across the room like electricity. Sujin turned. There was a red line painted across the floor, marking the boundary between medical staff and visitors. She pointed to it without hesitation. Behind that line, she said firmly, or I let him die. The room went still. The guard's jaw tightened. Another man shifted. Hands moved slightly toward hidden weapons. The patient on the gurney inhaled sharply through pain. Then, slowly he lifted one blood-covered hand. Just one. A simple gesture. Stand down. The guards froze. No words. No shouting. Just obedience. Sujin turned back to the table. What's your name? She asked the patient calmly. His eyes locked onto hers. Does it matter? He asked, his voice low but steady. I need something to write on your chart while I save your life. Pause. Ethan Black. She nodded once. Nurse Park, she replied. Sujin Park. There was no fear in her voice. No curiosity. Just focus. She pressed down near the wound to assess bleeding. You're going to feel pressure. His jaw clenched, but he did not look away. The residents moved under her direction. 2 large-bore IVs. Start fluids. Prep for possible surgery. Monitor pressure. The machines began to beep louder. His blood pressure dropped. The monitors screamed warnings. Sujin did not flinch. She had done this too many times to hesitate now. She worked quickly, efficiently. Controlled the bleeding as much as possible. Directed instruments. Asked for suction. Cleared the field. When she began searching for bullet fragments, Ethan's breathing grew heavier. Pain lined his face, but he made no sound. Through it all, his eyes stayed on her. He did not look at the guards. Did not look at the ceiling. He watched her. She ignored it. 3 hours passed in controlled chaos. 3 hours of pressure, stitching, commands, and quiet determination. Finally, the bleeding slowed. His vitals stabilized. The monitor tones softened into steady rhythms. He's stable, the resident confirmed. Sujin stepped back and removed her gloves. Her hands were steady. Ethan Black was transferred to recovery. Outside the trauma bay, the 6 men in black suits stood waiting like silent statues. Sujin walked out to meet them. He will live, she said in clear Korean. But he goes to ICU for 49 hours. No arguments. No interruptions. The lead guard studied her face for a moment. Then he bowed slightly. Thank you, Nurse Park. The gesture felt strange coming from a man who had nearly brought a weapon into her trauma bay. She gave a brief nod and turned away. There were other patients waiting. Other lives needing attention. She did not ask who Ethan Black was. She did not question why 6 armed men followed him. She did not care about the expensive suit that had been cut from his body or the authority in his voice even when he was bleeding. To her, he was a patient. Nothing more. Behind her, in a quiet ICU room, Ethan Black lay awake, staring at the ceiling. And somewhere between the red line on the floor and the steady beep of the monitors, something had shifted. Sujin Park walked back into the trauma ward unaware. She had saved his life. She had drawn a line. And she had just triggered something she did not yet understand. Ethan Black woke in the ICU with clarity. The room was quiet except for the steady beep of machines. A soft morning light filtered through the blinds. His abdomen ached, but the pain was distant compared to the thoughts circling his mind. She had treated him like he was ordinary. Not powerful. Not dangerous. Not important. Just a patient. In his world, people either feared him or wanted something from him. But Nurse Park, Sujin Park, had not looked impressed or afraid. She had drawn a red line and ordered his guards back. She had dug a bullet out of his body without shaking. That had never happened before. He pressed the call button. A young nurse entered, nervous the moment she recognized him. "Where is Nurse Park?" he asked. "She finished her shift, sir." He nodded slowly. Her full name. The nurse hesitated, then answered. "Sujin Park. She transferred 5 months ago. From America." He watched her closely. "Where does she live?" "Gyeoryong District." "Family?" "She lives alone." "Boyfriend?" "No, sir." "Social media?" The nurse blinked. "None that I know of." He gave a small smile. "Thank you." When Sujin returned later to check his vitals, he was already dressed. The 4 was gone. His wound was stitched neatly under the hospital gown. "You're not discharged," she said calmly while checking his chart. "I'm discharging myself against medical advice." "That's your choice." He studied her face. "Have dinner with me." She did not look surprised. "No. I'm asking, not ordering. And I'm declining, not considering." She handed him the paperwork and turned to leave. "Nurse Park." She paused at the door. "Thank you for saving my life." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone. "You're welcome, Mr. Black." The roses arrived on Monday. When Sujin walked into the trauma ward, she stopped mid-step. Every surface was covered. The nurse's station. The empty beds. The window sills. Even the floor. Red roses filled the room in overwhelming numbers. A small white card rested on top of the nearest bouquet. She opened it. "Dinner, please. EB." She crumpled the card and dropped it in the trash. Then she called maintenance. "Remove them," she said. "We have patients to treat." On Tuesday, more roses arrived. On Wednesday, roses and boxes of expensive sushi for the entire trauma team. On Thursday, a velvet case with diamond earrings. On Friday, a grand piano appeared in the hospital lobby. A professional pianist played for hours while staff and visitors stared in shock. Each day another card. Each day the same signature. EB. Sujin watched it all with narrowed eyes. This is harassment, she thought. It disrupted hospital operations. It drew attention. It crossed boundaries. On Saturday, Ethan Black appeared in person. He sat in the trauma bay waiting room wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He looked calm, composed, like a man who had never been told no. Sujin stopped in front of him. "This is harassment," she said. "This is courtship," he replied. "Your methods are insane. One dinner and I stop. You'll stop anyway. Then one dinner won't hurt." She studied him carefully. "Fine. One dinner. After that, you leave me alone." "One dinner," he agreed. The restaurant was small and elegant. And empty. "You rented the entire place?" she asked. "I wanted privacy. Or control." He did not deny it. "Both. But mostly I want you to feel safe saying no to anything I suggest." She sat across from him. "Why me?" she asked directly. "You're wealthy. Powerful. You could choose anyone. Why chase a foreign nurse who keeps rejecting you?" Ethan did not answer immediately. "Because you looked at me and saw a man who was bleeding," he said quietly. "Not my money. Not my guards. Just a patient." Sujin looked down at her glass. "I'm not impressed by power." "I noticed." The conversation stretched over hours. She told him about Baltimore. About 13-hour shifts. About gun violence. About Caleb Morrison. She spoke calmly, but her hands tightened around her fork when she mentioned the 6-year-old boy. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she asked what he did for a living, he leaned back. "Import and export. Logistics. Supply chains. With armed guards. Day Soul is complicated. She laughed softly. That's the worst answer I've ever heard. He smiled. I'm not a good man, Sujin, he said finally. I've done things that would make you walk away. But you make me want to be better. The honesty startled her. At the end of the night, he walked her outside. Anyone who tries to hurt you, he said quietly, will learn what that costs. I'm not yours, she replied. Not yet. 2 weeks later, hospital administration called her in. She expected a complaint. Instead, the director smiled nervously. Your performance has been exceptional. We're offering you a permanent contract with a significant raise. She waited for the rest. And Myrie Medical Center is under new ownership. Her stomach tightened. Blackridge Holdings. She stood up so quickly her chair scraped the floor. You're joking. I assure you I am not. Outside in the parking lot, she dialed Ethan's number. You bought the hospital, she said when he answered. I invested in a struggling medical center, he replied smoothly. This is manipulation. It's business. And me? If it makes you uncomfortable, I'll sell it, he said. Your job, your autonomy, those are yours. She was silent. That night she called him back. Dinner. Your place. I'll send a car. I'll take a cab. He laughed softly. You really are different. She ended the call with one condition. You're telling me the whole truth this time. He agreed. Sujin stood at a crossroads. She could walk away again. Or she could stay. She chose to stay. Detective June Park lowered his binoculars slowly. From the rooftop across the street, Ethan Black's penthouse windows glowed against the dark day-Seoul skyline. Rain had not started yet, but clouds gathered low and heavy. She's inside, June said into his radio. Third time this week. Static crackled before a voice answered. Detective Nolan Mercer from the Internal Integrity Unit. Yeah, Nolan replied casually. We figured she would be. June tightened his grip on the binoculars. She's a civilian. She's sleeping with a known criminal, Nolan said bluntly. That makes her leverage. June exhaled slowly. She's a trauma nurse. She probably doesn't even know what he does. Nolan laughed short and sharp. Don't be naive, Park. People like her always know more than they admit. June said nothing. We can't get Black on his businesses, Nolan continued. So we squeeze what he cares about. June's jaw tightened. She's not part of this. She is now. Pause. We pay her a little visit, Nolan went on. Routine traffic stop. Ask questions. Remind her that foreign work visas can disappear real fast if paperwork gets messy. June lowered the binoculars completely. That's intimidation. That's strategy. June hesitated, then spoke carefully. I'd like reassignment. There was silence for a second. Denied, Nolan replied flatly. The next morning, June stood in Captain Min Jae-han's office. Sir, June said respectfully, I believe this approach will escalate the situation unnecessarily. Captain Han leaned back in his chair. Ethan Black has corrupted half this city, the captain said. Judges, politicians, business owners. He's untouchable because everyone is afraid. And a nurse changes that? June asked quietly. Sometimes, the captain replied, you fight fire with fire. June left the office with a tight feeling in his chest. 3 nights later the rain came. Cold autumn rain that turned the streets into dark mirrors. Sujin Park walked alone, umbrella in one hand, hospital bag in the other. Her shift at Myrie Medical Center had ended late. The streets were quiet. An unmarked cruiser rolled up beside her. The passenger window lowered. Ma'am, Nolan Mercer called out. We need to speak with you. Sujin stopped. Her umbrella tilted slightly as she looked toward the car. Is something wrong, officer? The doors opened. Nolan stepped out first. Detective Carter Hale followed from the driver's side. June remained seated for a moment before stepping out as well. Rain soaked their jackets instantly. You know Ethan Black? Nolan asked. Sujin kept her voice calm. I'm a nurse. I know many patients. This isn't about patients, Nolan said, stepping closer. This is about you associating with a criminal. I don't know what you're talking about. Carter moved around behind her, blocking her path. You foreign nurses come here thinking you can do whatever you want, Carter said. Sleep with whoever you want. You need to learn respect. Sujin's grip tightened on her umbrella handle. I've done nothing wrong, she said steadily. Carter reached out and grabbed her arm. June felt something twist in his stomach. That's enough, June said quietly. Nolan ignored him. You think we can't make your visa disappear? Nolan asked Sujin. One call and you're back on a plane. I work legally, Sujin replied. I follow the law. Nolan stepped even closer. Rain ran down his face. June saw it then. The shift in Nolan's posture. The slight movement of his hand. Not threatening. Drawing. Nolan, wait, June began. The gunshot exploded in the night. Sujin's body jerked violently. The umbrella slipped from her hand and clattered to the pavement. She fell. For a second, everything felt silent. Then June heard his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Blood spread quickly across her white scrubs, turning them deep red under the streetlight. She tried to move. Tried to breathe. Rain mixed with blood on the pavement. June dropped to his knees beside her. What did you do? He demanded. Nolan was already holstering his weapon. Shots fired, Nolan said loudly into his radio. Suspect down. She's not a suspect. June snapped. Carter was already speaking into his own radio. Officer involved shooting. Female resisted arrest. June stared at Sujin's face. Her eyes were wide with shock. Her lips parted but no words came out. Blood pooled beneath her shoulder. You shot an unarmed nurse, June said quietly. Nolan's gaze hardened. She reached for something. She reached for nothing. Nolan stepped closer, lowering his voice. You were here, Detective Park. You saw her resist. You saw her reach. June shook his head slowly. That's not what happened. That's what the report will say, Nolan replied calmly. She resisted arrest. She reached for a weapon. I felt threatened. Rain poured harder now. Sujin's breathing grew weaker. June pressed his hands against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. Nolan, he said, his voice shaking. This isn't right. Nolan looked down at him without emotion. Careful, he warned. You're 3 years out of the academy. You want to throw that away over one woman? June looked at Sujin's blood on his hands. He knew two things at once. An innocent woman had just been shot. And he was standing inside the beginning of a lie. Sirens began to approach in the distance. Rain kept falling. And the red on the pavement grew darker. Ethan Black answered the call on the second ring. He was standing in his penthouse office reviewing shipping reports. The skyline of Day Sol shimmered beyond the glass walls. Sujin, he said. What came through the phone was not her voice. It was breathing. What? Shallow. Struggling. His expression changed instantly. Sujin, he said again, sharper this time. A sound followed. A gunshot. Then the line filled with static and distant rain. A different voice replaced the breathing. This is Detective Nolan Mercer of the Day Sol Metropolitan Police, the man said calmly. There has been an incident involving Ms. Park. Ethan's eyes went cold. What incident? Routine stop, Nolan replied smoothly. She resisted arrest. Reached for something. Force was applied. The words were controlled. Measured. Lies wrapped neatly in procedure. Ethan did not shout. He did not argue. He moved. The phone was still at his ear when he stepped out of his office and into the main hall. Activate everyone, he ordered. Staff scrambled instantly. Call the surgeons at Day Sol Central Hospital. Alert my private medical team. Get the car. He hung up without another word. Within seconds, his head of security was at his side. I want the names of every officer on that street, Ethan said. Now. The man nodded and began typing rapidly on his tablet. 30 seconds later, the information appeared. Detective Nolan Mercer. Detective Carter Hale. Detective June Park. Ethan read the names once. Addresses. Families. Work history. Everything. Yes, sir. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped inside without waiting. The underground garage roared to life as engines turned over. 4 black SUVs formed around his car in seconds. The convoy shot into traffic like a moving wall. Red lights meant nothing. Drivers swerved aside as the vehicles forced a path through the rain-soaked streets. It looked less like a businessman traveling and more like a head of state under emergency escort. Inside the car, Ethan was silent. His phone lit up repeatedly with updates, but his gaze stayed forward. Day Sol Central Hospital came into view. The convoy stopped abruptly at the entrance. Ethan stepped out before the vehicle fully halted. 2 hospital security guards moved toward him instinctively. They did not get close. His men blocked them without hesitation. Where is Sujin Park? Ethan demanded. The fear in the nurse's face was immediate. Trauma bay surgery, she whispered, pointing down the corridor. Ethan walked quickly, footsteps echoing across polished floors. Outside the operating room, a wide glass panel allowed a view inside. Sujin lay on the surgical table. Her white scrubs were gone. Sterile drapes covered her body. Her face looked pale against the harsh lights. Surgeons moved quickly around her. Instruments clinked. Monitors beeped in sharp rhythms. Blood stained the edges of the sheets. Ethan stood still watching. His reflection merged with hers in the glass. His head of security approached quietly. "We've confirmed the officers are assigned to Jonghee Precinct," the man said. Nolan Mercer filed the report. Carter Hale listed as assisting officer. June Park listed as corroborating witness. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What does the report say?" "Resisting arrest. Suspect reached for a weapon. Justified force." Ethan's eyes did not leave the operating room. "Contact Judge Sungwoo Choi." "Sir?" "Wake him up." The call was made immediately. Ethan took the phone when it was handed to him. "Judge Choi," he said evenly. "I need 3 arrest warrants signed within the hour." There was hesitation on the other end. "On what grounds?" the judge asked carefully. "Attempted murder," Ethan replied. "And if paperwork becomes complicated, simplify it." Silence followed. "You're asking me to?" "I'm asking you to decide where you stand," Ethan said calmly. "By morning, those 3 officers will be in cells I own or graves I dig." The line went quiet. Then the judge agreed. Ethan handed the phone back without emotion. Behind the glass, the surgeons worked with urgency. Minutes felt like hours. Elsewhere in the city, inside the locker room of Jonghee Precinct, Detective June Park sat with his head in his hands. His uniform was still damp from the rain. Across the room, Nolan Mercer spoke confidently with other officers. The official report had already been filed. Carter Hale closed his locker and walked toward June. "You look pale," Carter said. June looked up. She was unarmed. Carter lowered his voice. "Get your story straight." June shook his head. "This isn't right." Carter stepped closer. "You're 3 years out of the academy," he said quietly. "You want to throw that away?" June said nothing. "The report's clean," Carter continued. "Resisting arrest. Reached for a weapon." Nolan felt threatened. "She didn't reach for anything," June replied. Carter's expression hardened. "You start talking about what really happened, you're the only one going down." June stared at the floor. In the operating room across the city, machines continued to beep. Outside the glass, Ethan Black stood motionless, watching every movement inside. The rain had not stopped. And Daysol had no idea that its balance had already begun to shift. The lights went out at exactly 11:17 p.m. One moment Jonghee Precinct was loud with ringing phones and tired voices. The next, everything dropped into darkness. A second later, the emergency lights kicked in. Red. Not soft red. Not comforting red. Harsh red that made every face look guilty. That turned the walls into something from a nightmare. "What the hell?" someone started. The doors burst open. Men in black tactical gear flooded inside with terrifying speed. They moved like soldiers, but they were not police. Their uniforms carried no badges. No names. They secured exits first. Front doors. Back hallways. Stairwells. Officers barely had time to reach for their weapons before cold steel pressed against their temples. "On your knees," one of the black-clad men ordered. The entire bullpen fell silent except for heavy breathing. Detective June Park froze for half a second before hands grabbed him from behind. His wrist twisted. A gun pressed against the side of his head. "Don't," the voice near his ear said quietly. "We're not here for you." June's heart pounded in his throat. Across the room, Nolan Mercer and Carter Hale were forced down beside their desks. Confusion turned quickly into fear. Then the lights came back on. White this time. Bright and unforgiving. And he walked in. Ethan Black. Charcoal suit. Perfectly tailored. Not a wrinkle. Not a stain. He looked like he had stepped out of a boardroom, not into a police station taken over by force. His eyes were empty. He moved through the room slowly, calmly, as if he owned the building. No one tried to stop him. He stopped in front of Nolan Mercer. Nolan was on his knees. "You shot my wife," Ethan said. His voice was quiet. Not shouting. Not emotional. Just certain. Nolan lifted his chin slightly. "That's not what the report says." Ethan moved so fast it shocked everyone watching. He grabbed Nolan by the collar and slammed him against a desk. The wood cracked under the impact. "She was walking home," Ethan said. "From a hospital. After saving lives." Each sentence came sharper than the last. "You shot her on a public street." Nolan struggled to breathe. "She resisted." Ethan shoved him harder. "She saves children." She saved strangers. And you decided she was a threat. Carter Hale tried to speak, but one of Ethan's men silenced him with a firm grip on his shoulder. Ethan stepped back slowly. Take them, he said. Nolan, Carter, June. All three were dragged to their feet. June's pulse hammered. I didn't shoot anyone, he said quickly. I tried to stop him. Ethan's eyes flicked toward him. You were there, he said simply. They were forced into waiting vehicles. The convoy moved quickly toward the industrial district. Docklands Sector 9. The warehouse was large and empty. Concrete floors. Metal beams. The air smelled of oil and rust. A single hanging bulb lit the center of the room. Under it stood a metal table. Tools rested on its surface. Nolan, Carter, and June were pushed to their knees beneath the light. Ethan walked in last. The warehouse door shut with a heavy echo. I want to be clear, Ethan began. His voice carried easily across the empty space. Sujin is alive. Relief flickered across June's face. If she wasn't, Ethan continued calmly, you would not be breathing. He looked at Nolan. She will have scars. She will wake up from nightmares. She will flinch when she hears sudden sounds. He paused. You put that into her life. Nolan swallowed hard but tried to stay composed. We're police officers, he said. You can't touch us. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Can't. He stepped closer. Do you know what I control? He asked quietly. Shipping routes. Customs officials. Supply chains. Construction contracts. Judges. Politicians. He gestured around the warehouse. I am the invisible infrastructure that keeps the city running. Silence filled the space. You thought a badge protected you, Ethan continued. It does not. He did not kill Nolan. Death would have been quick. Instead, he dismantled him. Information was presented. Bank transfers. Hidden accounts. Bribes. Internal integrity deals. Carter broke first. I'll talk, Carter blurted out. I'll tell everything. Ethan did not look surprised. Nolan's face drained of color as documents were laid out in front of him. Evidence. Witness statements. Recorded conversations. His career crumbled in minutes. His protection vanished. Then Ethan turned to June. June did not lower his eyes. I was there, June said quietly. I didn't pull the trigger. But I didn't stop it. Ethan studied him. Cowardice, he said, not malice. June nodded once. I'll testify. Everything. I'll tell the truth. Ethan considered that. You will, he said. You will burn the corrupt parts of your precinct with your own words. They'll kill me, June whispered. No, Ethan replied calmly. They won't. He stepped closer. Because I own the levers of this city. The judges. The prosecutors. The people who decide who goes to prison and who walks free. June swallowed. You testify, Ethan continued, and you live. You stay silent and you disappear. June nodded. I'll testify. Within days, federal investigators arrived. Files were reopened. Charges were filed. Resignations followed. By the end of the week, half of the corrupt network inside Jonghi precinct was under investigation. Nolan Mercer's badge meant nothing now. Carter Hale's name was attached to confession transcripts. And Detective June Park stood on the edge of losing everything, but gaining something else. Truth. In Docklands Sector 9, the single hanging bulb swung slightly in the still air. The balance of day soul had shifted. And Ethan Black had made sure the message was clear. Sujin woke to quiet. Not hospital chaos. Not sirens. Quiet. The room was large and softly lit. Cream-colored walls. Private monitors. Fresh flowers on a small table near the window. It looked more like a luxury suite than a hospital room. Her shoulder throbbed. Memory returned slowly. Rain. Gunshot. Pavement. She tried to move and felt a hand tighten around hers. Ethan. He was sitting beside the bed, still in a dark suit, though it looked worn now. His hair was slightly out of place. Dark shadows rested under his eyes. You're awake, he said quietly. His voice cracked. How long? She asked. 4 days. You haven't slept. 73 hours, he replied. But I'm fine. She studied his face. What did you do? She asked. Her voice was weak but steady. He knew what she meant. Did you kill them? She continued. No. She searched his eyes for truth. Nolan Mercer and Carter Hale are facing federal charges, he said calmly. Corruption. Attempted murder. Evidence tampering. More will follow. And June? June testified, Ethan answered. His words dismantled the corrupt parts of the precinct. The police commissioner has already resigned. She absorbed that slowly. You destroyed the police department. I destroyed the corrupt parts, he corrected. The ones that thought they could shoot you and walk away. She closed her eyes for a moment. This is too dangerous, she whispered. Maybe I should leave. Korea. This life. Ethan did not interrupt. Maybe I should have never stayed. Silence filled the room. Then she opened her eyes again. No, she said softly. I'm tired of running. She looked at him fully. I love you. The words were simple. Clear. Ethan leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against her hand. Marry me, he said. She blinked. I just woke up. Marry me anyway. A small smile touched her lips despite the pain. You're impossible. Yes. She studied him for another second. Yes, she answered. For weeks later, they stood in the small chapel inside Daeseol Central Hospital. The ceremony was quiet. Private. Sujin still wore light bandages beneath her white dress. Ethan stood beside her in a dark suit, posture straight, expression calm. Judge Sungwoo Choi officiated. 2 witnesses Ethan trusted stood at the back. There were no photographers. No grand celebration. Just vows. I promise to protect you, Ethan said, his voice steady. From everyone. Including myself if necessary. Sujin held his hands. I promise to stay, she replied. Even when it's hard. Even when it's frightening. He slipped the ring onto her finger. And just like that they were husband and wife. 7 months later, Sujin stood in their penthouse bathroom holding a small white test. Her hands trembled. She walked slowly into the living room where Ethan was reviewing documents. We're having a baby, she said. The silence that followed was different this time. Not heavy. Powerful. Ethan stood slowly. Our child, he said quietly. Within days, security around their home doubled. Cameras were installed. Guards rotated in shifts. A panic room was constructed behind reinforced walls. The building's private elevator system was upgraded. You're building a fortress, Sujin said one evening. I'm building safety, he corrected. She placed her hand over her stomach. Strong and protected, she said. Strong and protected, he agreed. They stood together at the penthouse window. The same city that had nearly killed her spread beneath them in glowing lights. He had almost burned it down in rage. Now it stood steady. It belonged to them in ways both visible and invisible. Do you regret it? Ethan asked quietly one night. Leaving Baltimore. Staying here. She thought about Harbor Line Metro General. About Caleb Morrison. About the bathroom mirror where she had felt empty. She thought about the scar on her shoulder. She thought about love. No, she said. Not for a second. 5 years later, Myrie Medical Center's trauma bay buzzed with controlled urgency. Sujin stood at the center of it, calm and confident. A group of young nurses surrounded her as she demonstrated proper pressure technique for a wound. Steady hands, she instructed. Clear mind. Fear doesn't help the patient. Her scar rested hidden beneath her sleeve. Upstairs in Ethan's office, their 3-year-old child sat at a small table with crayons scattered around her. She spoke 3 languages without effort. She laughed easily. She knew her mother saved lives. She knew her father handled important business. She did not know about the shadows that moved quietly around her. She did not know how close she had come to not existing. She only knew she was loved. Through a glass partition between the trauma ward and the executive offices, Ethan watched Sujin. She felt his eyes on her and looked up. He mouthed 3 words. I love you. She smiled and mouthed them back. Some love stories begin with flowers and soft music. Some begin with bullets and rain. Both are real. Both are fierce. Both survive. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.